Adolf Hitler served in the German army during the First World War. Did you know that he was wounded twice, promoted once, and even decorated on 2 occasions? Many claim he was a brave war hero, but was he really? Was Adolf Hitler a war hero? Stay tuned, because in this video we're going to talk about Adolf Hitler during World War I. Hey, welcome back. If you're new on this channel, welcome. I'm Stefan, history teacher, hustling history for you. And if you're interested, please consider subscribing and also hit the notification bell to join the hustle. Let's start. When the First World War broke out, Adolf Hitler was living in Munich, where he had settled since 1913. Now, originally he was from Austria. He was rejected from the art school of Vienna twice, and now he was making a living by doing painting jobs in the Bavarian capital. Now, some people claim that he moved to Germany to avoid Austrian draft, but that seems unlikely, because when the First World War broke out, Adolf Hitler volunteered for the German army. The question remains, how was Hitler, as a foreigner, able to be drafted in the German army? Well, most likely they never asked for his citizenship when he applied, which could be likely because it was such a rush since a lot of people applied for the army at the time. Hitler's regiment was named the List Regiment and was named after the commander Julius von List. At first they were housed in schools, since the city was simply too small to harbor that many soldiers. They were equipped with old material. They had to practice with the old rifles, most likely the Gewehr 88. On the 8th of October, King Louis III from Bavaria said his goodbye to the troops. They were not transported directly to the front, no. First they had a 10-day training course on Lechfeld, north of Munich. Now, from what we understand from Hitler's correspondence, this training was extremely heavy, although this did not prepare them for frontline duty. And on the 21st of October, the List Regiment was transported in 3 trains from Munich to Lille, northern France. On the 27th of October, the List Regiment was ordered to march towards Ypres. There they would endure their baptism of fire. Now, the thing is that the British had intercepted the German radio communication, so they knew an attack was coming. The German commanders said to their troops that the British had run out of bullets, most likely to comfort them. But this was not the case, because when they moved forward, they were met by a devastating barrage of artillery fire, and the men of the List Regiment fell by the masses. Nevertheless, they pushed on, and Hitler, he romanticizes his battle by writing, "With a burning love of the homeland in their hearts and a song on their lips, our young regiment went into action as if going to a dance." The reality was utterly grim. There was a British machine gun post located in a nearby windmill, and on a tobacco field, British riflemen aimed their rifles at the German soldiers and fired. The soldiers fell by the masses again. Nevertheless, they pushed forward, and what followed were savage man-to-man combat fights. Now, the British soldiers, they were experienced professional soldiers from the British Expeditionary Force. Therefore, the German recruits were no match when it came down to man-to-man combat. The List Regiment fought for 4 days. Gelüvelt was captured, but the Ypres salient remained in British hands. The losses of the List Regiment were disastrous, 75%. The unit of 3,000 men was reduced to 725. Of the 25 officers, 4 were left. One of the fallen was the regiment commander, Julius von List himself, the man the regiment was named after. Hitler survived, and during the Second World War, he claimed that this experience made him believe life was a permanent struggle for life and death. After the battle, Hitler was promoted from Schütze, private, to Gefreiter, Lance Corporal. Now, this promotion was mostly due to the losses the List Regiment had suffered. There was a lack of officers, and now non-commissioned officers were promoted to fill in the gaps, and therefore lower ranks were promoted as well. The newly acquired rank did not give Hitler the status to command soldiers, and basically it didn't change much. But what did change was the following, because on the 9th of November, Hitler was made a dispatch runner. Therefore, he served a lot of time at regimental headquarters. Now, until recent years, historians always believed that dispatch runners ran a great risk of being killed. And however this is true, historian Thomas Weber, who wrote Hitler's First War, the main source for this video, he claimed that there were basically two types of runners: regimental runners and battalion runners. The former category Hitler belonged to spent most time on regimental HQ and also lived in relative comfort. Early December, Hitler received the Iron Cross secondary class for bravery alongside 60 members of the List Regiment. This was mostly due to the connections he had at regimental HQ, since he often spent time there. The question remains, was Hitler a brave soldier or not? Well, that is hard to determine, because testimonies of fellow soldiers released in the 1920s and 30s often had a political agenda behind it. Those who supported his political campaign might have described him as a loyal comrade, but those who opposed him might describe him as a coward. And, needless to say, after Hitler became the absolute ruler, it was a risky business criticizing the Führer. Anyway, Hitler described the day he received his first Iron Cross as the happiest day of his life. Now, after New Year, the happy days were over and morale plummeted. Hitler wrote that because of the bad weather and the constant shelling, it could not go on forever like this, and that he longed for home. From March 1915 till September 1916, the List Regiment served at Fromelles. Hitler served most of the time in an underground dugout. By the way, did you know that in the 1970s, historian Werner Maser wrote about an illegitimate son Hitler might have fathered during his time in Fromelles with a French woman? Now, biographer Ian Kershaw thinks this is very unlikely, because Hitler had a reserved character and was often described as a monk-like figure. He, for example, never went to brothels when his comrades did. Also, the sister of the woman in question denied that it was Hitler who had a relationship with her sibling. On the 27th of September 1916, the List Regiment was transferred to the Somme front. The Somme was one of the most bloody battles in history and made a deep impression on the troops. Hitler wrote the following: "For us, this was the first of a series of heavy engagements, and the impression created was that of a veritable inferno rather than war." At the Somme, Hitler got wounded for the first time. Now, this did not happen at the front line, as Nazi propaganda later claimed. No, Hitler was in a dugout that was hit by a small shell. Hitler got wounded in the left upper thigh. He was transported back to Germany. He was recovering from his wound until March 1917. Now, being back in Germany, he most likely encountered the low morale at the home front. We do not know what Hitler's exact thoughts were at the very moment. In Mein Kampf, he wrote that he was in a hospital and he despised these loud-mouthed agitators that boosted their cowardice by saying how they deliberately wounded themselves in order to get away from the front. But I do need to remind you that this book was written in 1924, and by that time Hitler had severely radicalized. Alright, back to March 1917. The List Regiment was now located at Vimy and suffered heavy casualties during the Battle of Ypres in April that year. Morale suffered and cases of insubordination and even desertion rose. In the summer, the regiment was transferred to Ypres. There, they would experience only the beginning of the Third Battle of Ypres, also known as the Battle of Passchendaele. But right before the battle was about to unleash, they were transferred to the Alsace. Now, do note here that the regiment did suffer some severely casualties because of the initial barrage. Now, Hitler, he had other things on his mind because he lost his dog Foxhole, the English terrier he had grown so fond of. And even till the Second World War, he reminded people that the person that stole his dog had ruined his life. In September, Hitler went on leave and he visited Berlin, a city he grew really fond of. Mid-October, the List Regiment was transferred to Champagne in France. In March 1918, the German army unleashed the Spring Offensive. Peace was achieved on the Eastern Front with Bolshevik Russia. So now the Germans could send their troops from east to support their comrades in the west. However, the US had declared war on Germany and US troops poured into northern France. So it was now or never, the last chance for Germany to win the war. The List Regiment served as a supporting regiment, so they moved behind the frontline troops as they advanced. Later, when the advance grew to a halt, they had to dig in again, and mid-July, the List Regiment participated in the Second Battle of the Marne that led to a disastrous German defeat. The failed German Spring Offensive has cost the List Regiment 482 deadly casualties. At the end of July, the List Regiment was transferred to Château in France. Now on the 4th of August, Hitler received his second decoration, the Iron Cross First Class for bravery. Now a lot of historians think that this was the proof that Hitler was a brave soldier. But as mentioned before, most people that got themselves an Iron Cross was due to their connections. And since Hitler was a dispatch runner and spent time at regimental HQ, he had his connections. Now here comes the interesting part. And what I say now might shock you. I read in Hitler's first war that the officer that suggested Hitler to be decorated was Hugo Gutmann, a German of Jewish descent. Hitler later left his regiment to attend a signaling course in Nuremberg, Germany, and after this he took leave and went to Berlin again. Meanwhile, his regiment suffered severely losses because of constant British shelling, and cases of desertion rose. After a month, Hitler would return to his regiment that was now stationed in Comines, France, and there his first war would come to an end. Mid-October 1918, Hitler came into a mustard gas attack, and he and several others were temporarily blinded by this. He was transferred to Pasewalk in Pomerania in Germany, and there the First World War would come to an end. Now in his book Kampf, he wrote that a local pastor brought him the news, and Hitler was furious. He was so angry with the Germans that had signed the armistice. He considered them a gang of despicable and depraved criminals. The news of the armistice was unbearable for him, and he said he went blind for a second time. In Kampf, he wrote, "It was impossible for me to stay and listen any longer. Darkness surrounded me as I staggered and stumbled back to my ward and buried my aching head between the blankets and pillow. I had not cried since the day that I stood beside my mother's grave." Historian Thomas Weber wrote that the First World War perhaps influenced, but surely not determined, Hitler's political radicalization and anti-Semitism. So the question is, what did? How did Hitler become a Nazi? That I will cover in the next episode. Make sure you do not miss it. If you like this content, please consider becoming a patron, because with your donations I can keep doing this and expand. If you want to know more about the first battle Hitler took part in, the Battle of Ypres, you can click right here for an episode that I shot about that on location a while back. Please do not forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I see you next time.